Hey, we're going to read chapter 6 of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Make sure you're following along in your book or on the PDF. The whole village turned out on the Elo, men, women, and children. They stood around in a huge circle, leaving the center of the playground free. The elders and grandees of the village sat on their own stools brought there by their young sons or slaves. Okonkwo was among them. All others stood except those who came early enough to secure places on the few stands which had been built by placing smooth logs on forked pillars. The wrestlers were not there yet, and the drummers held the field. They too sat just in front of the huge circle of spectators facing the elders. Behind them was the big and ancient silk cotton tree which was sacred. Spirits of good children lived in that tree waiting to be born. On ordinary days, young women who desired children came to sit under its shade. There were 7 drums, and they were arranged according to their sizes in a long wooden basket. 3 men beat them with sticks, working feverishly from one drum to another. They were possessed by the spirit of the drums. The young men who kept order on these occasions dashed about, consulting among themselves and with the leaders of the 2 wrestling teams, who were still outside the circle, behind the crowd. Once in a while, 2 young men carrying palm fronds ran round the circle and kept the crowd back by beating the ground in front of them, or if they were stubborn, their legs and feet. At last, the 2 teams danced into the circle and the crowd roared and clapped. The drums rose to a frenzy. The people surged forward. The young men who kept order flew around, waving their palm fronds. Old men nodded to the beat of the drums and remembered the days when they wrestled to its intoxicating rhythm. The contest began with boys of 15 or 16. There were only 3 such boys in each team. They were not the real wrestlers, they merely set the scene. Within a short time, the first 2 bouts were over, but the third created a big sensation. Even among the elders, who didn't usually show their excitement so openly. It was as quick as the other 2, perhaps even quicker, but very few people had ever seen that kind of wrestling before. As soon as the 2 boys closed in, one of them did something which no one could describe because it had been as quick as a flash, and the other boy was flat on his back. The crowd roared and clapped, and for a while drowned the frenzied drums. Okonkwo sprang to his feet and quickly sat down again. 3 young men from the victorious boys' team ran forward, carried him shoulder high, and danced through the cheering crowd. Everybody soon knew who the boy was. His name was Medeka, the son of Obierica. This paragraph is describing the wrestling match, and it's kind of almost like it's similar to the beginning of the book when the story talks about Okonkwo as a young man and how he threw the cat Omelins, and that was kind of how he gained his power and his prestige in the Igbo tribe. But what's interesting about this paragraph is it almost paints a pass the torch kind of image, which means it almost suggests that there is a new coming of age in the Igbo culture, and perhaps even for the character Okonkwo, which we can kind of connect to his symbolism if he's meant to represent the Igbo, like the traditional Igbo culture. It says in this paragraph that but the third wrestling match created a big sensation even among the elders who didn't usually show their excitement so openly. When I read that, I made a connection to Okonkwo because he also is apprehensive to outwardly show or express any kind of emotion except for anger. And so it seems that there's a connection between the elders or the older people in the Igbo tribe and Okonkwo. So perhaps the character Okonkwo is meant to represent the traditional Igbo culture. And another connection that you could make in this paragraph is that perhaps Okonkwo is also representative of the drums. So there's a lot of time or a lot of moments in this paragraph where it's describing the drums, and eventually toward the end of this paragraph it describes the drums as being drowned out by the crowd because of these younger these younger wrestlers. So I don't know, the paragraph suggests that maybe something is going to happen. It might be foreshadowing the demise of Okonkwo or the demise of the Igbo culture in general, like the traditional Igbo culture, which is along the same vein as far as where this book is going. We know these colonists are going to be coming and taking over and making changes, bringing Christianity with them and things like that. So it's in this way that I think the author is foreshadowing and symbolically conveying that this is going to happen. The drummers stopped for a brief rest before the real matches. Their bodies shone with sweat, and they took up fans and began to fan themselves. They also drank water from small pots and ate kola nuts. They became ordinary human beings again, talking and laughing among themselves and with others who stood near them. The air, which had been stretched taut with excitement, relaxed again. It was as if water had been poured on the tightened skin of a drum. Oh my gosh, so we've talked a lot about Okonkwo being associated with fire and dust and sand and dry things. And here it's describing, like right after that previous paragraph where it sounds like new things are happening and the tribe is changing and evolving and the traditional way of doing things is being overtaken. Now we have this metaphorical description of a drum, which is in this time period was created by the dried hide of an animal. So like a leather type thing makes the drum that you actually hit, being overtaken by water. So that imagery. And I mentioned previously with another chapter that Okonkwo's son Nwoye is often compared to water and fertility and life and rejuvenation. So this might mirror that. This is taking over the Igbo tribe as well. So a lot of circular spiraling points are coming up in this book, and they're all connected. Many people looked around, perhaps for the first time, and saw those who stood or sat next to them. I did not know it was you, Akwefi said to the woman who had stood shoulder to shoulder with her since the beginning of the matches. I don't blame you, said the woman. I've never seen such a large crowd of people. Is it true that Okonkwo nearly killed you with his gun? It is true indeed, my dear friend. I cannot yet find a mouth with which to tell the story. Your chi is very much awake, my friend. And how is my daughter Azima? She's been very well for some time now. Perhaps she has come to stay. I think she has. How old is she now? She's about 10 years old. I think she will stay. They usually stay if they do not die before the age of 6. I pray she stays, said Akwefi with a heavy sigh. This is weird because I think this is something that our culture doesn't believe in or talk about. But recognizing that this is definitely an alien culture, like they have a lot of things that are different from our own. My inference with this dialogue that they have going on here is that they believe in reincarnation. And it sounds like Akwefi, remember she's one of Okonkwo's wives, it sounds like she's had experienced the deaths of a lot of her children. And it sounds like she's talking with this woman who's standing next to her. We don't know who she is yet, but she's talking with her about her daughter Azima. And it sounds like Akwefi has always kind of half expected Azima to pass away for some reason. But Azima is now 10 years old and she's still alive, so they sound hopeful that she won't continue this like cycle of death in Akwefi's life. I pray she stays, said Akwefi with a heavy sigh. The woman with whom she talked was called Kielo. She was the priestess of Agbala, the oracle of the hills and the caves. In ordinary life, Kielo was a widow with 2 children. She was very friendly with Akwefi, and they shared a common shed in the market. She was particularly fond of Akwefi's only daughter, Azima, whom she called my daughter. Quite often, she bought bean cakes and gave Akwefi some to take home to Azima. Anyone seeing Kielo in ordinary life would hardly believe she was the same person who prophesied when the spirit of Agbala was upon her. The drummers took up their sticks, and the air shivered and grew tense like a tightened bow. The 2 teams were ranged facing each other across the clear space. A young man from one team danced across the center to the other side and pointed at whomever he wanted to fight. They danced back to the center together and then closed in. There were 12 men on each side, and the challenge went from one side to the other. 2 judges walked around the wrestlers, and when they thought they were equally matched, stopped them. 5 matches ended in this way, but the really exciting moments were when a man was thrown. The huge voice of the crowd then rose to the sky and in every direction. It was even heard in the surrounding villages. The last match was between the leaders of the teams. They were among the best wrestlers in all the 9 villages. The crowd wondered who would throw the other this year. Some said Ukefo was the better man. Others said he was not the equal of Ikezu. Last year, neither of them had thrown the other, even though the judges had allowed the contest to go on longer than was the custom. They had the same style, and one saw the other's plans beforehand. It might happen again this year. Dusk was already approaching when their contest began. The drums went mad and the crowds also. They surged forward as the 2 young men danced into the circle. The palm fronds were helpless in keeping them back. Ikezu held out his right hand. Ukefo seized it, and they closed in. It was a fierce contest. Ikezu strove to dig in his right heel behind Ukefo so as to pitch him backwards in the clever Iji style. But the one knew what the other was thinking. The crowd had surrounded and swallowed up the drummers, whose frantic rhythm was no longer a mere disembodied sound, but the very heartbeat of the people. Personification again of the drums and the village. The wrestlers were now almost still in each other's grip. The muscles on their arms and their thighs and on their backs stood out and twitched. It looked like an equal match. The 2 judges were already moving forward to separate them when Ikezu, now desperate, went down quickly on one knee in an attempt to fling his man backwards over his head. It was a sad miscalculation. Quick as the lightning of Amadiora, Ukefo raised his right leg and swung it over his rival's head. The crowd burst into thunderous roar. Ukefo was swept off his feet by his supporters and carried home shoulder high. They sang his praise, and the young women clapped their hands. Who will wrestle for our village? Ukefo will wrestle for our village. Has he thrown 100 men? He has thrown 400 men. Has he thrown 100 cats? He has thrown 400 cats. Then send him word to fight for us. All right, that's it for chapter 6. I will see you guys next time for chapter 7.